What's today all about? Milwaukee versus metal. Got the Milwaukee 14 gauge electric metal shear here, and a couple of Milwaukee hand shears. One of them's the 16 gauge Bulldog Snips, and the other one's just their regular, regular old sheet metal deal. So they make two models of this electric shear. They've got a 16 gauge model, I believe, and then they've got the 14 gauge capable model. And I got the 14 gauge because I want this thing to power through some stuff. And we got some examples of metal here. Got some 18 gauge here, and got a piece of 16 gauge over here, and I'll give you some details about that stuff. Alright, a couple things about sheet metal. This is a big half sheet of 18 gauge. I bought a full 4x8 sheet of this. It was $72, in good old 2013 here, so, kind of on the expensive side, whatever. So anyway, now about the thickness of these metals. 18 gauge is probably the heaviest stuff you want to attempt to cut by hand at all, if that's what you're going to wind up doing. And you can see it's kind of flexible and all that. You can kind of hand bend it. I even just bent the corner down a little bit here. And if you measure this, this is basically 1.5 millimeters thick. 18 gauge steel. Now here I've got a piece of 16 gauge that I'm using for something, and I cut this with other various methods. I was able to use the Milwaukee snips on this a little bit. There's 16 gauge snips, which are called the Bulldog Snips. It can only do little tiny cuts at a time in this kind of material. And when you measure it, this is 2 millimeters thick. So you've got 18 gauge, which is 1.5 millimeters, and 16 gauge, which is 2 millimeters thick. And this stuff here, you cannot even bend that with your hands. This is some tough stuff right here to make things out of. So you've either got to use like special cutting tools, or like I used a die grinder with a fiberglass cutoff wheel on this to go ahead and slice these pieces and whatnot. And I had a wooden bender that I made to put the angles on this. Alright, so what are we going to cut this metal with? Got a couple choices. Here's your normal tin snips, sheet metal shears, with the long nose on them. These probably handle up to 18 gauge, and you can cut this stuff pretty well. Can only bite about 1 inch at a time with these. If you use two hands, you can do it a little better. Then Milwaukee's got some new snips here called the Bulldog Snips, and these are supposedly for 16 gauge. You can only cut about 1/8 of an inch at a time in that heavier 16 gauge metal, but these have shorter jaws and they're pretty nice actually. So see, the cutting is much easier with these. But as you can tell, it starts getting crazy. If you're doing it with these, you really got to pay attention to how you're making the cut and all that. And then you get this big curl of metal here that you got to take off. Which you got to snip off and get out of the way. So next we're going to show you how the Milwaukee shear does it. Now this Milwaukee electric shear is also called a throatless shear. It just has an electric motor powering it, and it's got a piece that goes up and down, kind of like a sewing machine almost. And these little cutting edges here basically, act like a sharp anvil, and it just stitches away at the metal and chews away at it. You can see this kind of horseshoe shape of the jaws. That lets the metal slip through here and keeps it from curling. Alright, I'm going to use my marker here. And there's my cutting line. And all you got to do is line up the cutting jaws with your mark and just buzz along basically. And because this thing is throatless, you can cut curves and everything across a piece of metal without getting the curl, and you know, you can go straight through the middle of a sheet. So here we go. Of course I screwed up a little bit on the video here because I'm looking over at the camera, but you know, this is my first 5 minutes using this thing, and you'll see that was a nice easy chop there. So yeah, pretty much you know, there's a little bit of vibration when you first get this tool started to get it to bite into the metal, but then after that it's just nice smooth cuts through here, real easy. I mean, you don't even have to push hard or anything. So if you've got a ton of metal cutting to do, or slicing big sheets or whatever at home, a shear like this is great. Back in the day, like probably, I don't know, 1940s or something like that, they used to have throatless shears called a Beverly shear, and that was a hand-operated version of this. So they still make them to this day. I think it's the original company. It's got a throat like this, and they come in 3 different sizes. They have a huge handle running off, and you just pull down on this handle, keep pulling it, and it's got like a big manual knife edge that comes down and just easily cuts through the steel. So you can also do big sheets like this. If you've got the hand shears, it's hell to try and cut any distance on a large sheet. So you definitely need to look into powered methods or whatever. There's also another company called Malco that makes something called the Turbo Shear, and it's got a pair of jaws on the front that's almost kind of like a scissor type of deal, and you can bolt a cordless drill onto the back as the motor for it. And those are about $75 to $100. They've also got a handle on there so you can guide it and steer it. Mostly, I don't know, I think they have some heavy duty models, but they're for doing lighter steel like this, like 18 gauge. But for the real thick stuff, you know, we're talking up to 14 gauge, this is probably going to be one of the only games in town here, is something like this. So Harbor Freight makes one of these that'll do 18 gauge like this. It won't do 14 gauge at all, and I don't know how it's adjustable or anything like that. These Milwaukees are pretty nice. They're kind of pricey. You know, this thing gets up into the $300 range for one of these. So, you know, if you're on a budget, check out the Harbor Freight version. So that's a quick sheet metal video. All right, the trick with this gizmo here, there's that little gap in between the teeth. What you want to do is you set this thing on the metal, right into that little gap first, then switch it on, and continue buzzing along your straight line, like so. So get it right on there, get the teeth engaged into the metal, then switch it on. Beautiful. Quick and easy. And for freehand, that's actually not too bad. But yeah, this metal 18 gauge is definitely kind of wimpy.